And Home Was Kariakoo is a reflection on a life that was and a life that is. Here's M.G. Vassanji, author of And Home Was Kariakoo, a memoir of East Africa. And we welcome you to TVO.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here.
Yes.
Well, let's start with, where is Kariakoo?
Kariakoo is a neighborhood in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania, where I grew up, and it's a very busy neighborhood that's gone busier by the year. So, that's lots of Indian shops. Now, of course, it's a mixed neighborhood.
And Dar es Salaam, translate that for me. I always forget what that means.
It means a haven of peace.
Haven of peace, that's right, yeah. And there it is. If we look at the map right now, it's just outside Dar es Salaam. And you write about another neighborhood in Dar es Salaam called Gam, and how there's no music played in public anymore.
Well, nowadays, of course, when I grew up, there was music everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you went back, there was no music, and well, you hear the call to prayer from mosques quite a lot of the time.
More than before, yes.
More than before.
Much more.
That jumped out at you when you went for your most recent visit.
Because there was a big mosque, a couple of mosques when I was growing up, maybe 3, but now there are 2 or 3 more in a very small number of blocks. So it's just a bit. You wonder, you don't need that many, but that's how it is, And
why did that jump out at you when you made your most recent visit?
Well, over several visits recently, it jumped out at me because they weren't there, and you just wonder why the need for them. Of course, I understand it in a certain way. There are, in every faith, you have all these diverse groups, and they don't like to mix with each other, or don't like to pray together, or have different conventions of praying. But it just sort of points to the divisiveness that a faith can bring about.
Do you like it better the way it is now, or you liked it better when you were a kid?
It was more relaxed when I was a kid. Yeah.
More relaxed. Okay.
Yes.
One of the things we want to explore during the course of this conversation is the issue of citizenship, and you have an interesting background because you're from that part of the world, but home, for decades now, has been this part of the world. And I wonder how, to what extent do you feel more at home in Tanzania as opposed to Canada?
I don't think you can compare. It's like comparing 2 kids. It's not one or the other. It's just what's inside you. Home, in many ways, is Toronto, not even Canada. Toronto is where I've lived. It's a place where which I know completely, where I feel the safest. But the place where I grew up, I'm very fond of it. Sometimes I tell people it's like going back to visit your mother. Just because you moved away, that your mother has not gone away. You go there, she's grown old. You don't complain that she's old, she's yours. So in that way, things that are part of you and that you grew up with, that fed you and nurtured you, they don't disappear.
Well, when you're in Tanzania, it's a bit of an odd question, but how Canadian do you feel, or how much of a Torontonian do you feel like when you're in Tanzania?
Well, I just try to blend in totally. Right? I speak the language, and I speak it in a certain way, and I don't give myself away, because I just don't like being a foreigner in a place where I grew up.
Do you feel that way?
I don't want to feel that. But of course, it's easy to feel that. Wear certain kinds of clothes and behave in a certain way, and you carry your water bottle around, and you have your waist belt around you. Then they know you're a foreigner. But sometimes when you're traveling in the interior, and that's when sometimes you go to look at a site, the historical site, and then when they see you roaming around by yourself, going to visit a place, then they know you're a foreigner. Who else would?
Who else would go to such places?
And they have nothing else to do at that time.
Gotcha. Maybe you could give us a bit of a history lesson here. The South Asian population that is in Tanzania, how did that population arrive there in the first place?
Well, the connection between India, or what was India, and East Africa is ancient. It's 1,000 years old at least. Travelers who'd been to the coast of East Africa, they've written about it. The Portuguese who went on the way to India, they also wrote about the Indian traders, the Indian ships that were on the East African coast. But those were people in smaller numbers. But with the advent of colonization, and the colonization of India also, people felt freer to move right across the ocean to East Africa as traders. And in some communities of traders, they decided to stay there. And some, of course, kept more constant connection with their homeland. So it's been there all the time.
How much connection did they have with the rest of Tanzanian society?
Well, it's hard to say, I mean, because Indians, even within each other, they're sort of divided. So there is a connection, but then there are also borders. So with Africans, there were borders, but there was constant interaction. The Indians ran at that time most of the shops, even the tiniest shops. So there was constant interaction. But of course, there was a lot of suspicion. There was racism. It was a colonial situation, and that's what it was.
So, if you can compare the way you think it is for South Asian people living in Tanzania today to the way it was when you were living there as a child, how different is it?
Well, people are more, they have no doubt that they belong there, although during independence of Tanzania, when there was a lot of rhetoric of nationalism and race.
This is in the 60s?
Yeah, then, there was a lot of discomfort, and then there was Idi Amin across the border. So people were nervous because they were not sure. Even the Africans didn't know what independence meant, I mean, those who were not educated, they just thought they would walk into a shop and take it over. So there was a nervousness, but people, I grew up never having thought I had to leave, And even when I left for the United States to go to university. And I went with, aim of finally going back and teaching there. So it wasn't, of course, the people who came after me to Canada came to stay. But I had gone with the intent to go back and teach. So, when we were growing up, there was really no, you never conceived of going to live somewhere else. You conceived of going to be educated somewhere else, and usually it was to England,
Huh. Let me try another comparison with you. They say that kids who go to high school today in the big cities of Canada, they don't even notice race anymore, right? They live in a kind of a post-racial society where people are far more colorblind than my generation or previous generations would have been. Is it that way in Tanzania today, where people don't notice race as much as they might have once upon a time?
Yeah, but the things can get complicated because Asians, who live there, are totally at home. You hear them speak, and I get envious. I said, when I was young, I couldn't speak like that because they've been totally educated from grade 1, formally in Swahili, and the language is more sophisticated. So it's more relaxed there. Here, I don't know if we live in a post-racial society. I was speaking to my son once, and he never mentioned race throughout his high school. It was especially elementary school, and it was an excellent elementary school. And I used to go there all the time because I live very close by, and I spoke to the teachers and so on. But when he was in university, he said, "Yeah, it was there. The consciousness, of your own consciousness. It's what you bring into it. The difference."
What city was he going to university in?
Toronto. No, he went to university in New York.
Oh, in New York.
But he went to primary school and secondary high school in Toronto.
Well, that may
he's totally Torontonian.
That may say something about the difference between how we regard race in Toronto versus in New York City.
Yeah, well, race is there, but it's how you feel comfortable in your own skin. I mean, you notice it, but of course it's there. I mean, there's nothing positive or negative about it. It's how you feel comfortable. I think Toronto, when I first came here, was a nasty place. That was 1980.
Right.
But over the years, it's changed dramatically. That it's totally different.
For the better, in your view?
For much, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you remember all the instances. When we moved into our neighborhood. So someone came and I told my wife, "How did you end up here?" Things like that. But that was then. Now you would ask him, "How did you end up here?" So it's that level of comfort which I think Toronto gives you. Not everyone would agree with me, but that's how I feel.
Gotcha. You mentioned Tanzanian Independence, which I think was 1964. I want to just explore that a little bit here. When you were growing up in Tanzania, how important was that struggle for independence back in the early 1960s?
Well, Tanzania, it was a trust territory under the United Nations, although ruled by the British. So, every time we went to the movie, the Queen would come and we would stand up and so on. So it was colonial. But it was not a settler society. There were no settlers there. There were very few. so the transition to independence, once Britain had decided that it was going to let Africa go, was easier than Kenya, where there was a settler community. So there was violence and a lot of bitterness, and the dreams of turning Kenya into a Rhodesia or South Africa, had to be sort of.
Did you think it was important that Tanzania achieve its own independence?
Yeah, it's a question of whether you can are self-reliant or not, a question of dignity. Because you grow up otherwise feeling that the other race is superior, or they're better, and that it takes a lifetime to sort of get over. It's not easy. So I think it is for a question of dignity, and it's essential.
What are your feelings for the Queen today?
I just get amused, that's all. I mean, I sometimes wonder why there's, in the United States, for example, there's this sort of almost infatuation with royalty. And even here, I mean, when some prince got married, I said, what does it matter to me? It's not my son getting married. So it doesn't. But of course, politically, if you think about it, you might come across more serious kind of views.
It is interesting, though.
The question of a republic versus a monarchy,
yes.
and so on. Whether you need a symbol or you don't need a symbol. But then it's a human symbol, so I don't know. I mean, France manages all right.
You ever find it strange, though, that I mean, the Americans did everything they could to get rid of the monarchy
Yes,
more than 200 years ago. And I'm not sure there's a nation on earth that embraces the British monarch more than the United States today, maybe even more than the United Kingdom.
Yeah. Not only the British monarch, but the British themselves.
Yes, yeah, very good. Quite the Anglophile society.
Yes.
Okay, let's try this. Do you think that the optimism that accompanied the independence movement back in the early 1960s is still there in Tanzania today?
I don't think so. I mean, among the people of my generation, there is optimism and also hopelessness. So it's a mixed thing, I mean, if you really pin down a person, they'll say, well, of course it will get better. And, in the long run, it has to get better. Everything gets better in the world. But there is a sense of cynicism that there wasn't there when I was growing up.
Cynicism about what?
Whether things work, about corruption, about what's in it for me instead of what's, Kennedy's words, what can you do for the nation? I mean, that's why I say when I left, I wanted to go back to serve the nation. But I think now the young people, because they know there's corruption, they know what else is available in the world and accessible over, TV and internet, so they just ask, what's in it for me? We never quite said it as bluntly. Of course we wanted to better our lives, but it wasn't as cynical as you see it now. And there is also a greater reliance on foreigners, foreign aid. When I was growing up, of course there was reliance, but it was in a dignified way. It was almost embarrassing to be able to take aid from a European nation or from Great Britain just having got independence. But sometimes it was necessary. Now, of course, it's a way of life. It's like as if your hand is always stretched out. Put something in. And I find it almost humiliating coming from there.
Should we stop Western aid to East African countries?
Well, I wouldn't go far because I'm not an expert. There are experts, who take PhDs in this. And So, people who take PhDs on African poverty. But that's humiliating because that's one part of the globe that's sort of treated like that, almost as a prominent sick member of the world, as a salve to the rest of us so that we feel good about ourselves. When you lose change in your pocket, you throw there. And I think foreign aid, if it's there, should be done, with purpose. When there was Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, people wanted to give aid. Even Cuba sent aid. Right? So there are specific purposes for which you would give aid, but where there's a constant reliance on the foreigner, and usually it's a white man or woman, so there's a race thing comes in again as the giver, then I think it's damaging to a society.
Confirms all those prejudices.
Confirms all those prejudices. And I've had people in Toronto tell me, can the Africans do anything for themselves? And these people who then go to work in Africa and say, this is what we are doing. So it's humiliating. It also makes me angry, that it shouldn't be like that.
Well, let's follow up with this, because if you look at some news organizations like the BBC or The Guardian, they sometimes have what they call an African correspondent, as if Africa were a country, you know, in the same,
Yes.
in the same way you'd have a British correspondent or a French correspondent, you've got an African correspondent. How prevalent do you think that view is of Africa as a singular place, as opposed to, whatever it is, 53 different countries?
It's still there, but Africa is synonymous with poverty, with disease, with war. And Africa is huge, you know. There are poor places, there are wealthy places, you know, and there are very rich people who have money in all kinds of banks in the world, and there are people who are poor, and then there are people, ordinary people who can grow their stuff on the land which is rich and eat. So, you know, there are markets which are thriving, you know, it could look like any Walmart, but they are street markets. And then there are places, although I in my travels recently, I haven't seen places as any desperate places. When I was growing up, when I did my national service, I was in a town outside which there was that desperate poverty. It was a horrifying experience just to watch. But, you know, that was a pocket of the country. And I mean, it's just very diverse, and there are parts of Africa, for example, Kenya, which is as efficient as any other part of the world. You know, it's just that it has its own political problems, which it had even before the British left, you know,
Yes.
because it's the nature of the artificial boundary that was drawn up by the colonizers, that you have different peoples then brought up in the same system, sharing the same land, and there's conflict. But the efficiency, it's just mind-boggling when I went to Nairobi this time in January. So I find it amazing the way Africa is treated. Recently I read an article, someone comparing, you know, talking about the dictatorship in Morocco. And he said the level of education is what? The literacy rate is 70%. It's almost as much as Malawi. As if Africa was sort of pit, the bottom you could go to. And this is like constant, you know.
Well, shall we do a quote here from one of the great observers of all things current
Yes.
nowadays? Here's Jon Stewart from The Daily Show with a South African comedian named Trevor Noah, and they're discussing the differences between America and Africa. Watch the monitor over my shoulder. Roll tape, please.
Let's play a little game. It's called Spot the Africa.
This doesn't involve me identifying anything on a map, right?
No, I wouldn't do that to you.
Thank you.
Just tell me which of these pictures was taken in America and which one is from Africa.
Okay, I got this. The beautiful highway there on the right there, probably Silicon Valley. It's probably heading off to Twitter there. The one on the left, clearly been shelled by rebels. I'm going to go with Somalia, maybe. And
Actually, the road on the right is a superhighway in Central Africa. The photo on the left, I took that from my cab on the way here from the airport. Yeah. That's the FDR.
Well, there you go. Now, this image of Africa as, modern, educated, in some respects more advanced than some parts of the United States, that is not a view that is prevalent in Western media. Does that annoy you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, because, again, it plays to the stereotype. Africa has to be poor, it has to be uneducated, it has to be savage, you know. And we went to the best schools, you know, that you could. I went from a local school in Dar es Salaam to MIT, and I was way above average student. So it's not that Africa doesn't produce bright people, brilliant people, and a lot of people who left with me, they're professors at Maryland and Princeton and whatever, you know. And the same quality schools exist there. You know, of course, there are problems. The government schools are overcrowded. There are no textbooks. Sometimes the roads to the schools don't work in some parts of the country, and this is just due to corruption. But you do find, if you go to the city, private schools which are excellent.
Who do you blame for the fact that, well, you put it earlier, this singular view of Africa as a place of war, famine, poverty, dictatorships? Who do you blame for the fact that that seems to be the stereotype that so many people want to hang on to?
I think when you're talking of images, the only people you can blame are the people in the media, because they are the ones with the cameras and the sort of the authority to speak somehow. And they go around from place to place. I mean, at the BBC or whatever media you take, they could do some excellent reporting, but they show one poor place, another poor place, and you wonder how did they get there? Probably through, on a helicopter. They don't know what's in between. Nobody asked the question, how did you get there?
They do
Why
have
do you leak
airports,
so
right?
near?
Yeah. Well, here's another one. Again, take a look at the monitor over my shoulder here. This was running around social media. I mean, that really tells a story. Part of a campaign to dispel myths about Africa. Does that work, do you think?
No, it just shows one country.
Ah, interesting. So that's what when you looked at that, you said you saw an attempt to show Africa as one country.
Yeah, it shows one country, and I'm just curious what country that is, at the corner. But for me, that's what Africa, I'd like to know what's where, and why didn't I know exactly where it was,
Okay, but they're trying to make the point here that even though the Western media were just filled with stories about how Ebola was going to come over here and kill us all, it was really just a tiny part of Africa, and in most of Africa was Ebola free.
Yeah.
That's all. Does that work for you?
Not quite. I think you have to sort of emphasize it, but I mean, I'm not sure what to say, but you have, this kind of portrayals where all the diseases come from Africa, and it's not that there are no problems. There are parts of Africa which have huge problems. Yeah. But I can tell you, in the 1970s, when I was in the U.S., I was terrified of going to New York. It was a place for muggings and rapes, and Philadelphia was the rape capital of the United States. I spent 4 years in Philadelphia, so you can stereotype a place, but I think part of the blame is from people from there also, the leadership. If your hand is always stretched out begging, then what do you expect? The leaders of the 60s in Africa were proud people. I don't know if I should say this, but at some point West Germany tried to put pressure on Tanzania on a political issue. And they said, we will take away our aid if you recognize East Germany. And the president said, we are not prostitutes, that you give us money and we do what you want. And this was like a public speech, and I remember it very clearly, whether the language is appropriate or not. I don't want to go into that. But that feeling that you just can't tell us what to do. Take away your money if you don't want to give it to us. That pride is not there because you have presidents roaming from one rich country to another, hand held out, And the worst case was when a few years ago I read that the president of Tanzania said, we don't have mosquito nets, And an American actor said, I'll give mosquito nets. There are hundreds of people, thousands in Tanzania who would donate mosquito nets. It's that attitude. And the newspaper at the time was triumphant that the president was able to get mosquito nets. It's just, I think, for me, totally unacceptable.
Well, how do you deal with the notion that people mean well? They want to do the right thing.
They mean well. You can't take away from the fact that people want to do good. They feel like doing good, but at the same time, we should realize that we are doing good, but for ourselves. People reach retirement age; they have nothing else to do. They say, "Okay, let's build a hut in Tanzania." Well, that hut is more for you than for them, because they should be building their own huts. Or you want to feel good, so you're superior in a military way, you are superior economically, and so now you want to feel morally superior.
Really? That's how you interpret it? They want to feel morally superior?
I don't think it's deliberate. What I'm saying is that's what it amounts to. But the people who do good, of course, they mean well. But sometimes meaning well, one has to reflect on what it does to the other person.
So I want to be clear I understand what you're saying here. Are you saying that these gestures of outreach, if I can put it that way, we shouldn't do them because it makes...
Maybe they should be done after a little bit of thought and... well, there's so many people doing it that, you find it hard to actually know what to say because it's become a way of life here and there. But, I'm just pointing out what the issue is. It's an issue of dependence, total dependence, of humiliation, unintended, even when you mean well. But if you go to a poor relation in your extended family and you start donating stuff, they might get offended. They say, look, we are poor, but you can't just come and give us stuff and tell our kids what to do. And they pretend that
Well, the last part's different.
Yeah.
If people were in fact offering to build, let's say, these healthcare clinics in the middle of wherever, and then telling you what to do, that would be one thing. But if it's a gift with no strings attached just because they want to be helpful, how is that bad?
It's not bad. I think the people who want to do these things mean well. But if it happens at such an extensive level, then you wonder, and when you find that when you go there, when you go to a village in Tanzania, or you're walking about in the street, and you find that there's such an expectation that the foreigner will do something for me. And so where's the government? Why doesn't the government build clinics? Why don't the village boys and girls see their own government do something for them? Their own MP do something for them. Why should it be some white person from Germany or from Canada or from somewhere else doing something for them all the time? And then what happens is that the media then picks this up, and this is the image of Africa that's created, a totally dependent place where you have to do things for them. They cannot do things for themselves.
That you'd like to stop.
Well, I know, who am I to say? But I personally find it offensive.
Okay, that I get. That's our time. I want to thank you for coming to our studio
Thank
today.
you for having me.
M.G. Vassanji, the latest book is And Home Was Kariakoo, a memoir of East Africa, which we've been talking about for the last half hour. Great to have you here at TVO. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.